So welcome back to the class. This is web, not web programming, but visual programming. But of course, we're using web programming for purposes of demonstration of the principles. So as I mentioned, we're going to cover a lot of things as had been shared in the course outline, which is part of the meeting documentation. I think you've all gone through it. Last week we had started looking at HTML, and we looked at a bit of things like the HTML tag, what are tags, what are paired tags, what are empty tags, and that kind of stuff. Then I think we also looked at things to do with formatting, and we saw how we can be able to format text in terms of making them bold, making them underline, emphasizing them, striking them through, and all that kind of stuff. Then I think we also looked at HTML special characters like things like angle brackets and copyright symbols and currencies and stuff like that. And I also think we looked at images, how we can work with images, how we can be able to provide multiple images on our page, and that kind of thing. I think we also looked at lists, both ordered and unordered lists, and we specified examples of where we could use them. And I think we looked at tables, and we defined what tables are, what a table header is, what a table body is, and how to create elements within a table and that kind of stuff. Then I think we also looked at hyperlinks, that is how to be able to create links that can be able to connect us to different portions or different pages within our application. So I think that was our agenda for last week, and I hope that was covered well. I also remember that I gave us two assignments, which I have not seen any submission, even though I had mentioned that the submission deadline was supposed to be before this next class. I don't know if you consider this as the next class or tomorrow as the next class, but maybe your class rep will be able to tell me on the same. So today I want us to look at HTML form inputs. Somebody's saying something. Gerald, you want to say something?
Yes, sir. Yeah, that the so many people actually finished sending the assignments,
Okay.
but we didn't know how to. They did not know how to submit the assignment. So I think also specify how the assignment is supposed to be. And then with regards last class,
Mhm.
uh, we can follow up with the last. Some of us who are able to join the internet, but
Okay.
it has no sound. It has no sound captured, so
Oh,
you can only see the pictures.
so it did have audio, but
You haven't have the audio of it. It is just an audio.
sorry about that. You should have mentioned that. Now you're
But so
mentioning
far,
it.
but with regards to assignment, all everybody, most of the people told me they were ready, but they just didn't know how to submit it. So I
Oh,
think you
we
can
agreed.
clarify that.
Okay, we agreed that I was supposed to submit on email, and I think I also shared my email address. But nonetheless, I think we can be able to we can be able to see how that works out. Maybe I'll just share my email address as part of the class notes down here.
Okay.
Make sure your admission number is included as part of the assignment, name and admission number, so it makes it easier for me to know who has submitted and who has not. All right, so yeah, that's okay. Now that we have that out of the way, let's carry on with our agenda for today, which is HTML forms. So, for the larger part of last week or the previous class, we were discussing majorly on HTML and elements concerned with displaying data to the user. So today I want us to focus on the element that will help us to capture data from the user. So last time we were focusing on how to display the data to the user. Today I want us to focus on how to capture data from the user, and that is what HTML forms are all about. So forms are basically HTML elements which allow us to be able to capture data from the end user. Well, not only capture but also display. You can also use forms to display data, but the biggest part is it is used for purposes of collecting user data. And forms are going to be a very large part of our programming because it is what you're going to be using to capture user input, process it. Then, using the other elements that we learned last time, we can be able to output this data to the end users. So I'll jump right into our code editor, which is Visual Studio Code, like that we were using previously. Then we'll be able to carry on from where we left. So I have Visual Studio Code already opened over here. And these are the assignments that we did last week. So today I want us to start with forms. It's not PHP, it's HTML. Sorry, I'm used to writing PHP code a lot. So forgive me on that. So, not HTML. Now, this is why I wanted most of us to be able to accept the invitation because once you're trying to join classes like this, it makes it very, very easy for you to just join the classes without disturbing everybody else. Now, the link that I've shared with you on email, just click on accept, and every time you come to class, it will automatically log you in. It will not require me to admit you. So, kindly let's admit that. If I'm looking at the people who have accepted the invitation, they're quite few. And as you can see, now that you're already in class, some people are trying to come in and now they're distracting the class. I want you to, if you come late, just join in silently without disturbing anybody. Okay? So let's go straight into forms. So we said any HTML structure starts with a doc type. And by the way, there's a short form for writing this doc type. As I had mentioned, Visual Studio Code has something called emmet installed in it. And emmet allows you to be able to just output code in short format. So, for example, if I just type exclamation mark and I press enter, you're going to see it will put for me the entire HTML structure. That is, I have the doc type, I have the language, I have the head, I have the title, I have the body, and the closing HTML tag. Don't worry about the meta tags. We're going to discuss them much later on. But what's important is the document type, the head, the title, the body, and the closing HTML tag. So just by typing exclamation mark, then you press enter. That is if you're using Visual Studio Code, it should allow you to be able to output the entire HTML structure as required. So here I'm going to say forms. So today we want to work with forms, and forms will take a tag called form. So every time you're working with forms, just simply type the word form, then anything you want to display or you want to capture data from the user will come inside here. So form is what you're going to use. Now, forms rather, or a form would take a number of inputs, and we're going to discuss these inputs in detail. And I think we'll start with the first input. So you can use different kind of inputs to capture data from the end user. And the most common input we use is basically the text input. So if you go to any web page, you'll see that mostly we have a place where we are supposed to type something. If, for example, I go to google.com, let me just go to google.com over here. So this is an example of an input. This is an example of an input. So here I can just come and type whatever it is that I need. So this is actually what an input is. So it's a text area. It's a text, not text area per se, but it's a text place where a user can be able to input some text data. So let's begin with that now. Usually, when it comes to forms, we as I because I mentioned that forms are used to capture data, we also use labels. And labels are used to identify the form elements. Labels are important because one, they are used by screen readers to be able to identify the component that you are dealing with. So, for example, somebody is visually impaired, and when they hover their mouse, it can tell them that that particular field that they are hovering their mouse on is something like a username or a password or something of the sort. And at the same time, if you have very small clickable areas like option buttons or checkboxes and all that, now the labels also help you to be able to capture a larger portion of that particular area. So, well, I'll admit this person who wants to come in. Please kindly accept the invitation I've sent you on mail so that when you're coming to class, it is silent. Please. As you can see, it's becoming a bit distracting because once the class has started and it's when you want to come in, you want to distract everybody's attention. I want you to accept, click on yes, you are going to attend the meeting so that when you're attending the meeting from the link, you automatically just attend the class silently. I'll repeat that one last time. I think next time, if you don't accept it, I'll not admit you manually. Anyway, so I was mentioning labels are used for purposes of identifying other HTML elements, and they're used by screen readers to be able to identify. They're supposed to be able to identify components on your screen, and at the same time, they also help us with working with small clickable areas like radio buttons or checkboxes, whereby the user might not be able to be comfortably click that. Sorry. So yes, just that's why we will use labels instead. Okay. So um, so for you to input any element, I'll start with a label. So let me say I want to ask you for your names, that is first name and last name. So I'll put a label here. So label start with label like that. Then I use the word for. Then I put equal to sign. Then I'll put the ID of the element I want to touch. So maybe say I'm calling it first name like that. Then here I'll put first name, first name. So it means that this label is going to be attached to an element that has a name called first name. Then now I'll put my input here, which is input. Mostly inputs are of type text. So now that is short form. Let me just put it in full. So you use input, then you say type is equals to text, which is the default. Text is actually the default, so you don't need to specify text. If you don't put text, it will default text. Then you need to give your input a name. I'll call this one first name, right? Then I'll close that. Now, input are empty tags. So as you can see, I don't have a corresponding close input. We discussed tags last time, and we said we have two types of tag. We have empty tags, and we have opening closing pair tags. So input, break, and all that are examples of images, are examples of empty tags. You don't need to close them up. So as I put that, I can click on this, run it inside my browser, then you'll straight away see that I have input first name here. So I have first name, then I have a place where now somebody can be able to input their first name over there. All right. Now these people who are coming in is becoming a bit of a problem, but okay. So maybe I'll put this thing side by side like that, so that now we are able to see the code, and at the same time we are able to view the output of the code. All right. I hope the code is visible, and I hope the output is also visible, right? All right. So this is one example of an input. So text is an example of an input. So if I wanted to put another label, I would put something here, label. And by the way, when I type label and I press enter, you'll see automatically it puts the close label, and that's what is this label for. Then I'll say this label is for last name. Gerard, are you able to admit that person who is trying to come in? So I'll put input. When I press enter, you can see it asks me for a type, it's text. Then it doesn't ask me for anything else. So I'll need to just give it a name and say the name is last name, like that. So you can see I have first name and last name. Of course, if I wanted to create a line, I'll put something like that. This automatically places it in a new line, or I can go ahead and put a paragraph. This is not the best way to deal with forms. We're going to format forms differently, but just in case you wanted to display them from top to bottom, you can actually put a paragraph in between them if you want them to appear on different lines. As I've mentioned, we're going to style these things with other things later on in the future. For now, we just want to focus on the building blocks as HTML elements are concerned. So that is input. You can have as many inputs as possible. I can have first name, I can have last name, I can have your email address, and all that kind of stuff. So I can be able to capture all these things with the input, which is of type text. Now, the other type of input we have is of type password. So, for example, if I wanted to ask you for a password, you can see that if I type this text over here, like Richard Onyango, this text is appearing in plain text, so anybody can be able to see it. So what if I wanted to type in a password? So I'm guessing somebody will come here and say input. Then I'll say here is uh, name is equals to password. Now, it's important for us to be able to give all our input names. It is important for us to give all our input names and IDs because names uniquely identify the fields. So this is first name, this is last name, this is password. So the name is what uniquely identifies. So as you're defining an input, also make sure that you have an attribute called name, which you've attached to it so that you can uniquely target that particular element that you're talking about. Now, let me just put a label here that this is a password label. This is for password. Then I'll say password, right? Like that. Then maybe here I can put a paragraph just so that they are on different lines. So I have password here. The problem is if I type here, maybe my password is homegrown. You can see that is a very bad idea because the password is actually showing. We don't want passwords to show when people are typing in the password. And that's why don't use an input of type text, but instead we use an input of type password. So if you use an input of type password, then I come here and I start typing homegrown. You can see now the field is masked out and somebody who's looking over my shoulder cannot be able to see what I am typing. So when it comes to input, one of the type is text, which is the default, but then you also have password input, which allows us to be able to mask the field as we are typing. Now, when it comes to input types, we also have other things like, for example, I might want to capture date. So if I want to capture date, maybe say I have another paragraph here and I want to ask you for your date of birth. Sorry. I want to put maybe say your date of birth. So I'll simply say label for maybe say DOB or date of birth. Then here is date of birth like that. So if I wanted to put date of birth, as you can see, I can put not paragraph, but I can put an input. Then here I'll simply say name is equals to date of birth, DOB. Now, DOB should be inside the brackets like that. So if I come here, now you can see, well, it knows it's a date of birth field, but I have to type the date. Maybe say something like 1st of May 1990, for example, right? And as you can see, I don't want the user to type things like this because, first of all, they can make a mistake. They can type 1st of map, you know, tap 1st of map instead of 1st of May, right? This is not date. This is not any date for one reason or another. But since I'm capturing date of birth, I can validate that with JavaScript, but I also want to make sure that my users don't make a mistake right off the bat. So I want to be able to control that. So instead of giving them a text input to type in a date, I can give them a date input instead. So instead of putting an input type text, I can say an input type of date. So when I do that, now you can see I have a calendar here. So they can't make a mistake. They have to put day, month, and year. But also, they can click on this link and just pick a date from there. So it's much, much easier for me to be able to capture that data as date as opposed to using a text object, which I'll have to do a lot of validation, and users can be able to make quite a number of mistakes as far as the data capture is concerned. So that's another type of input that we can be able to use. Now, the other type of input that we can be able to use is email. So if I wanted to capture somebody's email address, well, I can still use an input of type text, and I call it name is equals to email or email address, right? So if I'm asking somebody for the email address, I'll put a label here, email address. Then I'll put here the email address. I want to capture your email address. So if I come here, I can simply type here. Well, don't worry about these fields because I am used to typing a lot of code. So probably, sorry, sorry about that. So probably some other emails that I've used before are coming in, but that's okay. I'll probably show you how to disable that anyway, if you want to disable it so that it doesn't remember. So you can see if I come here and I simply type Richard, that's going to be acceptable, right? So I have to validate and check that you've typed the correct email address and that kind of stuff. So for me to avoid all that and also to be able to guide the user appropriately, instead of using an input of type text, I'll use an input of type email. So if I use that and I simply type here Richard and well, I'm not submitting, but if I were to submit this form, it will simply tell you that it will simply tell me this is an invalid email. I should be able. So you can see if I hover, it tells me please include an at in the email address because it is missing. So it just as Richard is missing an at. So if I put an at, then I hover, you can see it is incomplete because I have to put an extension here. Now that is actually a valid email. So you can see there is no error that's coming in. But these placeholders are errors, yes. But of course, when I submit this form, if I say this is an email type, it will check that this email is complete prior to sending it. All right. Now the other type of input I can have here is maybe say a file. I might want to upload a file. Something say I want to upload my profile photo. So I'll put here something like that. Then I'll say label and I'll call it profile photo, right? So profile photo. So here I can put an input. Then what I'll need to do is to say I'll put an input of type file, which means it will allow me to be able to upload a file directly. So I'll simply say name here is profile photo. So you can see when it comes to attaching a file, there is no way I can ask a user to type in as much as it is an input, but it's going to be an input of type file. So as you can see from the screen here, I have now profile photo, which has a button that tells me what kind of a photo do you want to upload. Then when I click on this, I can be able to now pick the file that I want to upload. Say something like that. So if I upload that, then this file is what is going to be uploaded. So again, this is only for capturing the data. The processing is a different story altogether. We're going to look at how to process it much, much later, right? Now, there's also a possibility that you might want to capture something like time. So maybe I can ask you, what is the best time to call you for communication or for confirmation of anything else? So I can put a paragraph here again. Then I can come down here and say input. Now this time I want to use time. Input is of type time. Well, I need to put a label first. Uh, Best talk time. Best talk time. When can we talk best? So I'll simply have input of type here. Then the name would be best talk time. So as you can see, best of them from here, when I click on this, it simply asks me for the time. So instead of asking somebody to type in a time, they can just pick I'm comfortable at 10:30, like that. Then that captures that very, very easily. And this is standard HTML. It applies across any browser. Now, the other type of input you can have is color. The other type of input that you can use is color. So maybe I can ask you, what would you like your theme to be? So I can put a label here, and the label is theme color. So theme color. So assuming you're creating an application and you're allowing users to choose their theme, what is their theme color? Is it red? Is it orange? Is it blue? Is it maroon or stuff like that? So that now we can be able to display buttons in their theme colors or stuff like that. So I can come here and simply put an input. Now the type would be color. Color the American spelling, not color the European spelling. So if I put you here, that will not work out. It will default to text. If you put something that does not understand, it defaults to text. So color is color with the US spelling, not color with the UK spelling. Then I'll give it a name here, which is theme color like that. So you can see from here, I can click on this, then I can select the color that I want. Green, I can put green there. If I wanted blue, I can come to blue here, pick my blue. If I wanted red, I can come here and I pick the red that I want, and stuff like that. So color is another type of input that this would allow us to be able to capture. Now, the other type of input that we can be able to capture would be range. Now, range is where maybe I'm asking you something like, what is your salary expectation? Assuming this is a CV and I want to ask you your salary expectation, you tell me it is between this value and this value. So it is between 0 and, well, definitely it's not 0, but maybe, yeah, I can say it is between 0 and 35,000, and maybe I can put a default value, something like that. So maybe I'm creating a job portal and I'm asking people for their salary expectation, but I also have my reserve value. So I'll say the range is between X and Y, but my reserve value is also this amount. So that is where range would be applicable. Or maybe in terms of temperature, what temperature does this operate on? Is it between -5 and +30? So I can pick within that particular range. What temperature do you want for the component you're looking for, or stuff like that? So again, that's very, very important. So again, I'll come here. I'll create um, I'll create a paragraph. I'll put a label down here, and I'll say salary expectation. So salary expectation, or I can put even work experience. It doesn't have to be salary expectation. It can be work experience. Is it between 1 and 7 years, or 2 and 10 years, or something like that? So here I'll put an input. Again, the type will be range. Then I can give it a maximum and a minimum. So I'll start with the minimum. Minimum I'll say is let's work with 25,000. Then I'll put a value of maybe say 35K. And then I'll put now a maximum of 100,000. So you can see the minimum. Well, I'm not showing the minimum, but I can put labels here for the minimum and maximum. So here I can put maybe say 35K, and here actually this is 0 to 100, something like that. So that is 35K. So if I go, it will be between 0 and whatever. So you can be able to pick this value as I go along. So you can see I can choose any value between 0 and 100K. But if I started at, actually this should be 25. It's 25K and this is 100K. Yeah, like that. Of course, I can put these ones in their own blank line, so that now they appear like that. So it's between 25K and 100K. This is actually 35K. So that's an example of how we can use range value to be able to capture data from our end users. Okay. Now, the other type of input you can use, which is what I ought to have started with, is a hidden input. Now, most of the time we want to capture data, but then we don't want to show the user this data, but you want to capture it. So, for example, let me say I'm generating a staff number for you, or I'm generating a unique ID for you. That unique ID is going to be used over and over within this application. Now, the user does not see it, but it actually is part of the application, and that's why it's called hidden. So I can put hidden input here. So again, it will not be visible as you're going to see. So I can put a paragraph here, and I can say putting a label. Well, I can hide this. I don't need to show this. It doesn't make any sense there for now. So let me talk about, I was trying to implement the hidden input. Now for hidden input, I'll put a label, and I'll say this label is for ID, your ID. So I'll put label here, your ID. Now I'm just putting a label because I want you to see that your ID will actually appear there. But if I put an input type, and by the way, this is the shorthand for typing with Emmet. If I put input, then I put a full colon, it will ask me what type of an input do I want. I want a hidden input, right? Then when I put like that, it's going to put for me input type hidden. Then it just asks me for the name, which is your ID. Now, if you look closely on the user interface, you're not seeing anything inside there. But if I put this one to be text, you see it will actually appear. So input is just a text input, but not visible to the browser. So that's what I wanted to explain. Now we use this one very, very often, especially for the things that we want to use for purpose of calculation. Say for example, we're doing a forex application and we have the exchange rate. I don't want to show you the exchange rate, then I'll probably put it in the background. So from there, I'm able to get it directly and be able to access it. So an input will work very, very okay with that. Okay. So an input type hidden rather would actually allow you to achieve the same, right? So that's an input. Now, the other kind of input that we use a lot is the telephone input or tel input. Well, technically, it's a bit crazy because telephone numbers are different. Um, Landline numbers are have different formats and all these kinds of stuff. So it might be a bit of a challenge to use the telephone input, but it's actually there in the event that you want to be able to use it in any case, right? So just so you know, we can have here another input which is of type telephone. So I'll put here a label, then I'll say telephone number or telephone, just telephone is okay. Then I'll have here an input of type telephone, that's allowed. Then I'll give it a name, telephone. I'll give it an ID of also telephone. We're going to discuss IDs later, but for now, I'll focus on that. So, um, I have telephone here. Did I put a label? I didn't put the text, so it should be telephone. So I have telephone over there. So when I have this telephone, now I cannot type. I can type, yeah, the problem is with this telephone, I can type anything I want, but then it will tell me this is not a valid telephone number, as you can see. And then, again, it will depend on other elements, but as I've said, when it comes to telephone numbers, the best thing to do is to validate them using JavaScript because telephone numbers are very different. Landlines are different, country codes are different, lengths are different. If you're on landline and mobile, the length is also different. If you include the country code or omit the country code, the length is different. So when it comes to telephone, you might want to do the validation using JavaScript. But again, if you're using the standard ones like the US telephone number format, the UK telephone number formats, and all that, then it should be able to allow you to validate that data as you're capturing it. Now, the other type of input that we handle a lot is a number input. Number input is very, very important. Just like text, password, and the date, number is the fourth most used input when it comes to capturing data from the end user because we capture data that is number in nature most of the time. So I'll put another paragraph here and I'll put a label down here. Then I'll ask you something like, what's your magic number? So I'll put here your magic number. Then here I'll put an input. I'll put full colon, then I'll put number. So input is of type number. Then I'll give it a name of magic number. And I'll give it an ID of also magic number. I usually give them ID and name to be the same, but of course the names can be the same, but the IDs can. The IDs have to be unique on the entire page. I'm just going to show you an example of how that works out in a short while. So for the magic number over here, as you can see, when I come here, I cannot type anything that is not a number. I'm just trying to press keys on my keyboard. It doesn't work. But if I type numbers, you can see it's able to work with numbers only. So here I can only type numbers. So again, when it comes to telephone, you might want to validate with numbers, assuming sorry, assuming I'm going to be putting just the country code, then the telephone number, like that. So that is actually allowed, and this is actually a number in nature, right? So again, depending on whatever kind of application you're working on, number data type is very, very important. Then you can also use the increment and decrement option of the number depending on what your application really does. Of course, I don't expect these increments and decrements to work on mobile phone number field, but because it's a number field, it allows me to be able to achieve that. Okay. Now, we can also use image. You have file here, but you can also display image. You can use an input of type image as far as HTML is concerned because file allows you to be able to pick any type of file, but images allows you to only select images. So let me say I want to add maybe say the first one was a profile photo. Maybe now I want to upload a copy of your ID. So I can put here a paragraph and I say label ID copy. That's the name. Then copy of ID. Then I'll have an input type here of image. Okay. And you can see now I'm being asked for the source and the alt. We discussed image last time. For now, this one can be able to change as we move along, but for now, I'm not going to focus on that. So I can put, well, I think I have an image here. So I have images, not images, but images. Then inside images, I have birds view like that. So you can see it allows me to be able to also capture that. So this becomes an input, but of course, this one can be changed on the fly. Now, I don't like using this. I like using this image. Then I can be able to filter out what I want to show over here. So if I wanted to show images only, I'll be able to filter this out so that it allows me to pick images only. But again, as I've mentioned, it's also an option to have an input that can actually allow you to capture image, which you can be able to change on the fly and display it on the screen, as you can see over there. Is there any other type of input that I can be able to? Yeah, we have Wix or even URLs. You can use so other types of inputs. And by the way, I didn't mention in HTML, you can have comments. In HTML, you can also have comments just like any other programming language. So comments are the portions of your code that is not going to execute. So for example, I want to put to remind myself into the future what exactly it is that I was trying to do in a specific location. So I can actually put comments to tell me what's happening. So to put comments, you start with an angle bracket, then an exclamation mark, followed by two dashes like that. Then you press space. Then now you can type your comment there. I can say here, other input types. Now, as you can see, this is not going to execute anything that is inside here is not going to be displayed on the browser. Whatever I put inside there will never be displayed on the browser. So I can put multiple lines here, then I can now type whatever I want inside here. So other type of inputs are things like week, lowercase week. We have URLs. What else? We have month. Any other? Uh, well, maybe there could be others. I might not be able to tell all of them, but I think I'll share documentation that you can be able to get all of them. In any case, we don't use all of them in our application, but it's good to know what is actually available. So these are examples of inputs that we would be dealing with a lot. So very important, we have text, we have password, we have date, we have email, we have file, we have time, we have color, we have range, we have number, and of course we have image. Now image and telephone, personally I don't use them a lot, but the remaining ones will be very, very useful for us to be able to understand what they are, what kind of data they help us to capture, and how we can actually use them within our HTML pages, right? Any question up to that point? We're not done yet. We still want to look at two more important components, actually three, so that now we can be able to be comfortable with how to work with input elements as far as HTML components are concerned. Any question up to that point? You may raise your hand, then I'll be able to take them up. If there is none, then of course I'll be able to just continue. Okay, I can see Gerald is you raise your hand. Gerald, go ahead.
Okay. As we have done the first one in terms of the forms. Now, what about when I want, for example,
Hmm.
somebody to write first name, for example, first name,
Hmm.
as I've seen in some other forms,
Hmm.
where you want a first name, but you want inside. You don't want it outside. You want it inside. You want inside that forms, that box. You want it to write in a fade way first name, so that somebody actually can also see that it is the first name needed inside the box.
That's an interesting question. That's a
Yeah,
property
that is
called. Sorry, just go ahead and finish. Go ahead and finish. Though I think I understood your
okay.
question.
Then it's also in a case whereby you want to have a multiple and you select just one. Maybe, for example, if you look at our school the system, you can be asked which what are the following units do you do, and you can be given this. I'm doing visual programming. I'm doing advanced. I'm doing so you can choose one, or you can maybe just choose two. Yeah,
That's
only those two.
now you have jumped the gun because those are different types of elements altogether. I was only asking about the input because what you're asking is actually a select box with multiple options. But you're going to look at that, of course. That's what I said. There are still others that you want to look at. For now, I was only focusing on the input itself, right? So, what happens
Hello.
is what you've asked is a property called placeholder. So, for example, if I have this form over here and I wanted to show here first name, what I will do is I'll put a placeholder. So I'll come to the input here. Then there's a property called name. Now I'll go ahead and next to the name, I'll put another property called placeholder. Then I'll put the placeholder first name or whatever it is that I want to be typed. So if I do that, you'll see here now I have first name inside the bracket. So as I type my name, then it also goes away. Okay. So a placeholder is what actually inputs that text for you to allow you to be able to see whatever is there on the background. Now, there's also another thing that you've seen. Every time I click on this box, it tries to remember the names that I had put in before. Sometimes you would want that behavior to work. Sometimes you would not like that behavior to work because it becomes a bit of a bother. So to set it in such a way that it's not going to remember these things that I typed in the past, I can come here and add another property. Sorry, called autocomplete, and I set it to off. So if I say autocomplete and I say is equals to off like that. When this page loads, when I click here, you'll see now that field does not come. Of course, last name will still come, but first name will never remember that. So if I come here and I simply copy these two, and I put them on last name here, and I say this is last name, and autocomplete to off. Now you can see even autocomplete does not show that, right? So that's very, very important for us to be able to understand. Okay? So Gerard, I hope I have answered your question. As far as selecting multiple is concerned, we're getting to that to see how to use select. Now, who are these people who are coming to class long after it has started? Gerard, do you still have a question?
Uh, I'm okay. I'm okay.
You okay? Yeah. Okay, that's good. So we can carry on. Or is there any other person with any? Is there any other person with any other question? No hands raised. No mic on. So I think that is okay. So what we can do is we can go to there are also inputs, but I wanted to deal with them in a special way because they are not the regular input where they capture single elements, but rather they have multiple elements. So we have other inputs that allow us to capture multiple elements. And I'll begin with checkboxes, right? So This is still part of forms. So I'll create a new file here and I'll call it forms checkboxes.html. Now, forms checkboxes, let me just rename this one. Okay. So again here, I'll simply put exclamation mark and I'll say forms checkboxes like that. So now checkboxes is where now we want to allow a user to be able to capture more than one piece of information. So for example, I can ask you what kind of what are your hobbies or um, uh, which programming languages do you know? Right? So I'll give you multiple options and I'm expecting you to select multiple values. So multiple options, then you have to select multiple values. Are we together? So let's just see how that works out. So for you to use checkboxes is still an input, but I'm going to list the checkboxes one after the other. So let's talk about which programming languages do you know? So I can put something like a paragraph here and I say which programming languages do you know? Right? Then I'll give you options down here. So I'm going to give you multiple options, but I also want to accept multiple values. So I'll use an input. I'll use the short form. I'll use input. I'll put a colon. I'll put checkbox like that. Now the name can be programming language. Well, I can even call it something else. Maybe something like let me say HTML. Let me use lowercase HTML. ID will be HTML. Then here I'll put HTML. Now I'll dispose of this. Then I'll just run it again so that it refreshes this page with the page where I'm currently at. So you can see I have HTML here. So I can take HTML and I'll copy this several times, something like that. So I have HTML, CSS, I have JavaScript, I have PHP, and I have Python. Um, so so this is CSS, JavaScript, PHP, and Python. Of course, I can change that. That is CSS, JavaScript, PHP, and Python. So you can see I have them here. So, well, mm, okay, that does not look so nice. So what I could do is something like I'll create a div here, then I'll put a style. Don't worry, we're going to look at how to achieve this with CSS. I just want to change the look and feel a bit. It's inline. The display should be inline block. Yeah, I think it's inline block. Actually, make it flex. Then flex direction. should be, these are columns, so it should be rows. Why is it not picking that? Yeah, that should have picked. That should have picked. Row should have picked actually. Um, I don't know why. Okay, anyway, let me leave it out for now. I didn't want to do this, but let me just do that for purposes of this demo. We'll do styling later on. Yeah, so actually, let me just remove them entirely. I don't need them. So that's how I wanted it to look like. So you can see now have options. So I have an input of type checkbox. It has a name, it has an ID, then the text next to it. So you can see I can tick one or two or three where necessary. Okay. Now, there is just one small problem with this because sometimes clicking on these boxes might be too small. I mean, this is too small, and somebody who is visually impaired might not be able to get them clearly. Or if somebody is going to use the touch screen, maybe they might not be very comfortable with clicking on this element. So, clicking on this text over here should definitely make it easier to select this box. And that's why I was saying that's where now labels come into play. They enable us to be able to capture data so that if the things to be clicked are too small, they also assist us in matching those particular things. So let's put labels to these things so that now the user can comfortably be able to select the elements that we have over here. So what we're going to do here is instead of just saying HTML, we're just going to put here a label, and the label is going to be for the element. So it's going to be for the name of the element is HTML, like that. Then I'm going to put the text here, HTML. Now I want you to observe the difference. Initially, for all the others, if I click on the text, nothing happens. But if I click on HTML, you can see it actually checks and unchecks the box. So that should demonstrate for you why labels are important. I'll just put on a new line so that it is visible, or I can just hide this entirely so that I can bring this on the other side. Yeah, like so. So you can see when I put a label, then I specify the label is for this particular element. Then that label, when it is clicked, it automatically triggers selecting the element itself altogether like that, as you can see. So we'll repeat the same for all the others so that now they are easily clickable. So this one will be for CSS, and here it is CSS. I'll have another one here for JavaScript. Then I'll take here, remove this and put JavaScript. Of course, I have an additional text at the end there. I need to remove it. I'll repeat for PHP. So this will be for PHP. The four here should be for the ID or the name. These four should be pointing to the ID or the name. Just need to be very clear on that. PHP is here. Then finally we have Python here. I'll say label for Python, which is actually the name or the ID. Then the text here is Python. So if I refresh this page, I don't need to refresh it. So if I click on any of the labels, as you can see, it enables me to be able to automatically access the checkbox on this other side. And here we can access both um, multiple and single entries. Okay, so that's how input type checkboxes work. So checkboxes allows you to be able to give user multiple options. At the same time, it helps you to capture multiple values from the user. Okay, so there are an input type as I've mentioned, but they work a bit differently as you have seen over there. Okay, so besides the checkbox, we also have radio buttons. So here we have checkboxes. Then here, let's put radio buttons. What's going on here? Radio buttons. Now, radio buttons is where you have multiple options, but you want the user to select only one. Say, for example, I'll ask you, what is your highest academic qualification? Your highest academic qualification can only be one amongst many options, isn't it? So, what I can do here is I can ask your, sorry, paragraph, your highest academic qualification. So, your highest academic qualification, and I can simply now start asking you. So here I have input, and it's going to be of type radio, and of course you're going to give it a name. Maybe say something like, well, maybe yeah. Let me give it a KCP, KCP. Then here I type KCPE. Now then I can repeat this one, KCSE. Now, I think you might be questioning what is it that I've done to allow me to type or to edit multiple texts at the same time. Let's save that for another time. I'll show us how to configure our environment or the shortcuts to use to be able to achieve that. So we have KCSE. We also have, sorry, diploma. Actually, it should be certificate. I'll put a capital C here. Then there's diploma. You can just press Control D, it will highlight all the KCPs. Then you can just type them over. It creates what we call multiple cursors. And it's not diploma, it is diploma. So again, once I press Control D, I simply press Control and then delete the E, then press the A, it simply changes that. It makes your typing faster. Then you also have bachelor's degree. So the only thing that's going to change here is this B and this D. Something like that. So you can see we have four levels. Is it KCP, KCC, diploma, or bachelor's degree? Now I can put breaks here
Okay.
just to make it look nice.
Let's see what we can do. Ile nini ulifanya nini?
So now you can see what's your highest academic qualification. Now there's only one problem here, as you're going to see. If I click KCPE, my assumption should be I should not select KCSE, right? Is that the case? Now you can see there's a bit of a problem. Now that is not how this is supposed to work, because as I had mentioned, I'm supposed to use to select only one option amongst the options that are provided. And this is a common problem that most people encounter because of the way it's supposed to work out. Now, what makes it work out is that the names of the inputs must be the same. The names of the input must be the same. So yeah, I'll simply say highest qualification. Highest qualification. So if the names are the same, highest qualification, I'll give them the same name, but the IDs can be different. Okay, I'll give them the same names, but the IDs can be different. Now, if the names are the same, then I can only pick one at a time, as you can see. Now, that is how it's supposed to work out. It's a problem that most people encounter because they don't give the elements the same names. Okay? Yeah, so that is how, sorry, that is how radio buttons work. That's how radio buttons work. Sorry, I'm having a bit of a flu today, so kindly bear with me. And it's good I'm doing this online, so I'll not be able to infect you guys. Now, besides checkboxes and radio buttons, we can also provide users with uh, uh, an option where they can have multiple values, but they only select one of the options. And that one also introduces us to the select element. So we also have another element called select element, or some people call it a combo box or drop down list. So we have select or drop down list. This one allows me to be able to provide the user with a list of options, but they can only pick one element from that particular list. Okay? So let's say, for example, I want to ask you, how would you want us to communicate with you by default, right? Or I could simply ask you, what is your gender? So I can give you a gender, female, male, or I'd rather not say. It depends on whether somebody wants to say or not. So let's just go ahead and that I'll put a paragraph here and I'll say, what's what's your gender? So what's your gender? I'll put now, this is not going to be an input. You can see the rest of the things that you've been dealing with are actually inputs. Now this is going to be a select element. It's a different element altogether, even though it is still part of the input, but it's a different element altogether. So I'll simply say here, select, then I'll give it a name. The name is maybe say gender. The ID is also gender, sorry. So that will create a list as you can see over here. But now the list does not have items. So if I wanted to add items to this list, I'd use the option element. And the first one, I'll simply say choose. So I'll ask you to choose gender, right? Then now I can put the other options like give it a value of male and a text of male. Then I'll also give another option, value of female and text of also female. Then another option, let's say not say. So I'd have yeah, I'd rather not say yeah. So as you can see, it's I'd rather ID, yeah, like that. So if I come here, you'll see I have male, female, and I'd rather not say, and this should be a close option. So I have a select with an ID and gender. Then the select has multiple options that I can be able to select from. So when it comes to creating a list where I want to give a user a list, but they can only pick one value at a time, then a select would work very, very well. So as you can see, when it comes to gender, actually I can opt out to remove the choose, then the default becomes male. If you why I put choose is because I didn't want the default to become male. That's why I put choose in the first place. Now I'm basing this on experience because I know those are the things that happen. If I leave the choose out, it means that by default everybody is going to be assumed they are male, but that is not actually or might not actually be the case. So that's why I added that first option choose over there so that now you can choose, then you can pick male, female, or I'd rather not say they are mutually exclusive. So if I pick male, you can't be female. If I put another not say, then you're neither male nor female or stuff like that. So this is also another type of input that you can use to collect data from end user. I'm dealing with the elements that now allow us to provide users with lists and decide which options they can be able to choose from those particular lists. Okay? I think we're doing on fine. Let's look at one more list that is very, very interesting and it's a very common practice. It is called the data list. It's called the data list. Somebody has a question? Oh, show your screen, sir. Uh, I not shared my. I think my screen is shared, unless that's a very old comment. I think my screen is shared, right? Yes, my screen is shared.
No, your screen is not shown. Your screen is not shared now.
My screen is not shared now. Let me see.
Yes, yes.
Okay. How about now? Are you seeing it now?
Okay, I'm not able to see. I don't know from the rest.
Yeah, it was shared, so I think it should be visible. What do the others? What do the others think? Sarah says it's there. Ivy says it's there. So I think probably Gerard, the problem could be on your side. But no worries, I'm recording this, so you probably have it in just a few minutes. I'll be able to share the video so you can follow up in the areas probably maybe that you felt dropped out. Okay? All right, so I was talking about providing users with multiple lists, then allowing them to select only one option. And you've looked at checkboxes, you've looked at radio buttons, and you've looked at the select element or the drop down list, and you've seen how that works out. So the next one I want to look at is something called a data list. So a data list is where I'm giving you an input, like something like say, choose your county, right? And then I give you like 47 counties. Then you can start typing, I am from Nairobi, then it automatically filters out for you Nairobi or something of the sort. That is kind of like how a data list works out, right? So let's see how you can actually implement that. So I'll come here and I'll say data list like that. So for data list, first things first is I would put the list itself. Okay, I'll put the data list itself, and sometimes we put them inside an input, right? So you'll put it some inside something like an input, like that. Then the list is you give it a name. So the list is let's give it counties, for example, something like that. Then the next thing I'll give it is a name, which is counties. Well, it should be inside the brackets. Somebody wants my attention on the side. Let me just check. Um, oh no, it's Gerard who has left. Okay. Yeah, I thought so. So once I define my input, I've said my input is going to be a list called counties, and the name is also counties. Now, once I have added my input, then the next thing I'm going to add are the data lists. So I'm going to come here and put data list like that. So I'll give the data list an ID of counties like that. So that becomes my data list. Then inside my data list, I'll give it options now. So I'll give an option here. I'll say um, 047 is Nairobi. Maybe I can say option 001 is Mombasa. Then maybe I can put option 002 is Kilifi. 003 is Kwale. Maybe 004 is Malindi. Like that. Well, here I need to have put in a paragraph and ask you what's your county. What's your county, right? So what's your county? And I click on this, you can see I have Mombasa, Kilifi, and so on, right? So we can go on and on. Well, it does, yeah, I think it has done a good thing, but sometimes we might want just to have the values inside here without the text. Kwale, Malindi, and then of course Nairobi. So I'll remove this. Remember, I'm used to that because I use it for select. For data list, it's not. They are empty tags. They are not really a requirement for you to be able to provide. So as you can see now, I have these files over here. So if I click outside and I say I want something like Mombasa, you can see I have Mombasa and I can pick Mombasa from there. If I want something like Nairobi, you can see it's there. If I want something like Kwale, it's there. So it makes it very, very easy for me to capture this data as far as an entity is concerned. So it is a combination of a drop-down list and an input button where if I'm saying something like select your country, we have about 300 countries in the world. That list is rather long. If somebody was to scroll down to look for their country, it's a bit too much. But if they were to type the first few characters of their country's name, then they'll be able to get to it very, very quickly. All right. So that's how you would use this data list to be able to capture that kind of information. Okay. Well, then there's also somebody wants to get in. I don't know why you want to get in class at 10:30, 1 hour after it has started, but that's okay. As I was saying, um, the other input element we might want to look at is something called the text area. Now we have looked at the text. Text allows you to be able to type values from on the first line only, right? Something like your name. My name is Richard, right? But if I want to type something like a paragraph, like I want to give a lot of stories, I want to explain what happened in a certain scenario, that kind of a thing. This one does not support multiple lines, and it is very difficult for me to use a text for multiple lines. So for me to use multiple lines, so maybe I can say something like typing multiple lines here. So when you want to input data and you want to type multiple lines, then you use something called a text area like that. So I'll simply say about you, about you. So I don't need the ID, I don't need the columns and the rows, but I can leave them open like that anyway. So we'll format them later with CSS so that they look nice. So the text area, as you can see, would be here. Well, I could put a paragraph here and say, tell us about yourself. Sorry. Tell us about yourself. As you can see, now it allows you to be able to type in quite a bit of text. So I can say, I am a 23-year-old, enter. I love software engineering, enter. I study, sorry, at the Technical University of Kenya. And I can go on and on. So you can see if I put a text area, then I can be able to input as much text as I would want to have it. Okay. So again, when it comes to capturing data, it will depend on what element we feel is going to be sufficient to allow us to capture the correct kind of data. Remember, we have the input type, and the input type, there are quite many as we have discussed. There is text, there is password, there is date, there is file, there is like now checkbox over here. We have radio buttons, we have select drop downs, we have text area, and a host of so many other components as we have discussed today. So it all depends on how you want to capture this data from the end user. Now, once you have captured this data from the end user, of course, you also need to give them things like buttons, which now allow them to be able to submit this data. Now, we have three types of buttons that allows you to be able to send over data. So, buttons to send data. So we have different kinds of button to send data. Now there are two that are standard with forms. We have not done forms yet. Actually, we have done forms. So forms have different properties, which we're going to discuss in a short while. But let's just discuss the buttons first. So the buttons, there are three. We have submit. So you can put here input, and you can call it submit. Now this will just submit the form directly. So I'll simply say save profile. That's the text I want on it. So if I do that, let me just put a paragraph here so that now it appears, now you can see it appears down here. So you can see I have save profile. When I click on it, it will submit this form, all right? Then I can have another input, sorry, and the other input is reset. Reset will clear the form, okay? So what happens here is I did not declare this as a form, so let me just declare it as a form. There is no action for now. We're going to discuss the actions, the attributes. So if you want to use submit and reset, then everything inside here should be between the form and the close form. So I will put this inside here. I want you to observe. As I said, reset, I can give you value. Here is clear all fields. So if I say clear all fields, now what will mean is if I tick this and this, and I tick this, and I select female here, and here I select Malindi, and here I say I am a 24-year-old Kenyan, something of the sort. When I click on clear, you can see it has reset the entire field because the input type is reset. But if I say submit, what it will do is that it will submit this form. Of course, by default, you have not specified where it should submit, but it will submit it to itself. So it will submit the form, but it will submit it to itself. As you can see up here, it has the values that we had selected. So you have, let me just expand this one further so you can see. So you can see we have the uh, highest qualification, gender, we have counties, we have about you. So you can see all this data has been submitted as part of the URL. So that is what these two buttons do. Submit will submit the form, reset will clear the form. But then also we can have another type of input called button. Then the button, we can just give it, say something like save
You got understand.
details. Now, this one, I can now customize what I want to be saved on that. So if I click on this one, now I can customize what can be done on this field. So it is not a submit, neither is it a reset, but it's just a button that now a user can be able to click. So those are the action elements that you can be able to use when it comes to sending data that has been captured from a form. Okay? Now, let's discuss form attributes. Yeah. Let's discuss form attributes. Now, form attributes, forms have multiple attributes, and one of the attributes of a form is the action. Action is where you want the form to go. So, for example, if somebody fills in this form, where do I want the data to go? Now, if you omit the action of the form, as you can see at the top here, I have not mentioned anything to do with the form action. So it means that automatically the form will submit to itself if I don't specify that. But if I want the form to be submitted elsewhere, then the form will be submitted elsewhere. So I can say action here is maybe say, of course, usually we give our own URLs. Let me say something like save user.php, for example. Well, I know that's not going to work out. That one I know. But this is, you're saying, when somebody submits this form, take it to this particular file, then this particular file will process it. We're going to see how that works on into the future, not now. So if I click on save, you can see it cannot get that file, save user.php. It does not exist on my server, but that's where I have actually sent it. Okay? I'll give you a classic example. Um, Let me send it to Google. Then I'll say search equals TUK. I don't know if that would work. Usually they change this part a lot. So if I was to submit this form, you can see it tries to go to google.com and it's trying to send over the data from the form to google.com, and that is not allowed. Actually, that is too much W's. Those are too many W's. So if I try to submit, you can see it goes to Google, but of course it tries to give Google these things which Google does not understand, so it does not process anything. But you get the point. So when you say the action is where you want the form to go and get processed. Now, then there is now the method of sending the form. Now, the form has two main methods that you can send. We have the get method, which is the default. So, method is by default it is get. Now what get does, it takes all your inputs as you can see over here, then appends them as part of the URL. So if I put HTML and CSS and I put KCP and I put female and I put Nairobi and I put I am awesome, then I click on save, you will see that it has taken that data and has included it as part of my URL. You can see I am awesome, there's Nairobi as my county, and I can go on and on. So it means that the data that was on the form has been taken and has been appended as part of the URL that is being sent over. That is the get method, and that is the default method. Now the get method is not very secure because you can see the data is sent as part of the URL. So if you're dealing with things like passwords and keys and all that, this is not the best idea to use. And also, it has a limitation. So if you want to use the get method, the limitation is 2048 characters. So if you have anything that is longer than 2048 characters, then definitely that's not going to work out. So you can't use get for those scenarios. So that means that you have to use another method which is called post. Post like that. Now, post is not going to send over this data as part of the URL, but rather it's going to compile it and send it separately as a payload to the server. So for things that involve fetching simple sets of data, yes, you can use get. But when you want to share things like passwords and sharing files and all that, then we cannot be able to use get. Actually, if I wanted to upload any document, I cannot be able to use get. I have to use post instead. So since you have seen how get works, because it appends the form input inside the URL, let's see how the post works out. So again, I'll just clear this form, press enter, it is reset. So I'll right click and come to inspect here, and inside inspect, I'll come to my network here. I'll click on this upper link, then I'll click network. So here, I want to see what data is being sent over. So I'll say HTML, CSS, or maybe HTML and Python. Then I'll say this one has a bachelor's degree, sorry. They are male and they come from Malindi, and say this is the best course ever, like that. So once we do that and we say save, it will send the file as you can see, but it's not going to be part of the URL as you can see. So, but if I look here closely, you'll see that I have google.com and I have something called a payload. Do I have a payload here? No. Google is not the best way to do it. Let me not use Google. Let me just put the action to be myself, which means it does not go anywhere. Let me just refresh that. You can see it has actually redirected. So I'll just refresh that. I'll put, okay. Let me just close that for now. Let me close the network, refresh the form, then open it once I have refreshed. I wanted it to be clear so that you can be able to see what's going on. So I'll pick maybe say I'll pick Python and PHP. I'll pick KCSE and I'll pick maybe say mail. And probably this one is coming from Kilifi. Then say this is awesome. Now, when I save this profile, the data is going to be sent. As you can see, the form is here. It does not go anywhere. But you can see I have a payload here. And the payload is now what is going to send over the data. So Python is checked, PHP is checked, highest qualification is also checked, gender is male, count is Kilifi, and so forth and so forth. So you can see instead of sending that data as part of the URL, it sends it as part of a payload, which means that now this is the most secure way of transmitting sensitive data, and especially when you're going to be dealing with a lot of when you're going to be dealing with a lot of data like uploading files or doing security checks and stuff like that. You don't want to share that content as part of your URL, right? So I know that's quite a lot to take in. That is forms for you, and those are the elements that we use within forms. So we can use inputs, we can use select, we can use radio buttons, we can use text areas, we can use things like data lists, and so forth and so forth. So it's just for you to be able to now understand how you can be able to design your user interface and decide which component you want to use for capturing what kind of data. Okay, so I will give us an opportunity to ask questions at this point. Then I think from there I can share my next assignment, which is going to be due I think on Monday. Then we can be able to wrap it up until tomorrow when we can be looking at something else altogether. So I can give us an opportunity to ask for questions, then I can be able to carry on. You may raise your hand first of all, then I'll be able to pick you, then you can be able to go ahead and speak. Okay? Anybody? No question. Okay, so my assignment this week is going to be very, very simple. What I want us to do is to create a sign up form. So, create a user sign up form capturing their biodata and contact information. Capture, create a user sign up form capturing their biodata and contact information. That is my assignment for today. So you need to create this and make sure that it's available by Monday. We're still meeting tomorrow, 9 to 11. We're going to discuss something else altogether. Okay? All right. So if there's no question, as I've seen, there's no hand that has been raised up and all that. I think we can call it a day. Then we can meet again tomorrow. So thank you for your time, and please accept the request that I've sent on email so that when you're attending class, you just come in quietly rather than disturbing everybody else when they have already settled down. Okay. So without further ado, I think I'll let you guys leave. You can start the assignment right now. I think we have about 10 minutes or so before this class is actually finished. For those who can be able to submit, well and good, but this should be due by latest Monday. Okay. Thank you and have a wonderful day. I'll share the video recording right after this.